of the House Ways and Means Committee and ranking member on the Budget Committee. Representative Ryan, it's so nice to have you on the program.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Maria.
So bottom line, you voted against the financial regulatory bill yesterday. Why?
Well, a number of things. I think it does bring us to a new era of crony capitalism. You sort of have the nexus of big government, big business coming together. What I think will end up happening is we're going to politicize credit, number one. Number two, we're amplifying the too big to fail doctrine, where we're going to deem certain big interconnected firms systemically risky. They'll get cheaper capital at the expense of smaller and medium-sized competitors, and because they have an implicit tether to the taxpayer. So I think what we're kind of doing is we're setting up a whole bunch of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac-like structures in the financial services industry. It's going to stunt innovation, it's going to reduce competition, it's going to lead to a higher likelihood of more bailouts, and it's going to hurt the other smaller companies. That's why I call it crony capitalism. We could have done very sound financial regulatory reform without having to do all of this, but I see this as more sort of an ideologically driven bill than something that made good financial sense.
So, you know, what I was struck by was so many of the issues that actually got us into the crisis are missing.
Fannie and Freddie aren't even addressed in this bill.
Fannie and Freddie are not addressed in this bill. So why is that? Is it because this is such a massive mess, because so many governments around the world and large investors around the world own our Fannie and Freddie debt, and it could create a run on and disrupt capital markets? Why aren't we addressing this issue if it's such an enormous issue?
The government has turned Fannie and Freddie into the rug. You sweep everything underneath. We've already lifted the cap. It's about $400 billion of taxpayer dollar in the red. We've taken $5.4 trillion of Fannie debt. That's now explicit government debt. They're treating and using Fannie Mae as a policy tool, not as something that needs to be cleaned up for the future. And so that's why they put this off to the side. And I really worry that it's going to create more distortions into that sector of our market. And when you take a look at, the causes of the crisis, there's a lot of them. Loose money in 03 to 05, but Fannie and Freddie was at the epicenter of this. And to ignore this and call this financial regulatory reform to prevent mistakes from being made again, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's really fascinating, actually, because some people might say, why do we actually need more agencies? I mean, I know I say this a lot, but 400 agencies were overseeing AIG, and they missed what was going on, but we'll add another one, the Consumer Protection Agency, get some more bureaucracy in there. Let's talk broadly speaking about the bill. Solutions here, Congressman. What should it look like then?
Well, number one, I'm more of a believer of market-based triggers. Let's not have politicized credit where you're giving a new layer of government agencies who will deem firms systemically risky. What you will do is you will have bureaucrats who are politically intimidated, politically motivated, politicizing credit, treating creditors differently. That's going to expand the cost of credit. You've got a new regulatory agency that is going to funnel through all the credit decisions. That's going to make credit tighter, not easier, and it's going to stunt innovation. What I would have done is something like Luigi Zingales, an economist at the University of Chicago, and Oliver Hart have proposed, which are market-based triggers. Clean up the CDS market so those things work well, so that we have full transparency, and then use market-based triggers to determine whether a firm is over-leveraged or not, and then have certain requirements that kick in to make them lever up so that they're not putting themselves in a systemically risky position and taking down the economy with it. So I think there are a lot of things we could have done which were market-based, more transparency, continuing the attachment to risk and things like that to prevent casino capitalism from going into crony capitalism. Let's get the free enterprise system back up and running. And my fear is we have basically abandoned the elements of a free enterprise system to have a very vibrant and successful and internationally competitive financial services sector. Now we're going to ossify it with more bureaucracy, more rules. It's going to make it harder for smaller competitors to get in this game, and it's going to make it harder for us to have more innovative financial services products in the future.
We speak to business people all the time on this program and on this network, obviously, and increasingly we're hearing that kind of talk, what you're saying, that, the policies coming out of Washington are actually going to hurt things and not help things because it's bigger government, because it's higher taxes. But I mean, we're not seeing any change. So when is your party going to... I've read your blueprint for America.
I received your note. I appreciate that.
Thank you, because I thought that was very strong, and I was happy to see you're out with that. But when are we actually going to see more action from your party in terms of taking a leadership position then, if in fact you do think that the rules being acted out now are going to perhaps even cause a double dip?
Well, number one, we put out alternatives to stimulus. We put out alternatives to energy. We put out alternatives to health care. We put out alternatives to FinReg. It doesn't get a lot of press attention, but we put those alternatives out. You're going to see a big rollout of alternatives in September as well. We have put alternatives to these things out there, and we need to go to the American people as the alternative party, not just the opposition party, but the alternative party, saying, here's how we want to improve the economic growth and prosperity in this country by giving people more certainty that the rules are going to be clear, that we're not going to hit us with a wave of new taxes, new regulations, more borrowing, which props up interest rates, which jeopardizes the value of our money and our currency. These are the things that are happening right now. We need to propose alternatives that prevent that from happening. And so this FinReg is just more regulatory uncertainty on top of all the other uncertainty that's out there, which is depressing economic activity. We need to give alternatives. We have, and we've got to do more, and you're right. Now, hopefully more press attention will come to the ideas that we have been putting out there so that Americans see that they really do have a choice of two different paths, one by the Republican Party, one by the Democratic Party.
You know, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer made it clear last week that for the first time, no effort has actually been made to offer a congressional budget. Now, you're a ranking member on the Budget Committee. Congressman, where's the budget, and when will we see a budget?
You're not going to, because today they're doing a deeming resolution. The Democrats have decided for the first time since the 1974 Act to not even try and pass a budget.
Unbelievable.
And the deeming resolution means we will spend, and we'll spend whatever we want. We'll just do it without any prioritizing, without any restraints. That's happening right now. That fuels the uncertainty that we're not getting our borrowing under control, that we're not getting our fiscal balance sheet under control, that it's getting out of control, and that jeopardizes our economy even further. That fuels the speculation to a double dip. And I worry that the contagion from Europe is going to come hit us. We're going to have our own debt crisis. The CBO just upped by about 12 years in their model the day of reckoning when the debt really crashes our economy.
Now, the CBO released a report on the fiscal future of the budget, and one key finding was that the massive health care overhaul doesn't address the explosion in health care expenses. So first we were told that the health care plan was not going to cost anything, which very few people believed anyway. But now we realize exactly what so many executives have been saying, that it's going to cost them huge expenses in 2011. What are your thoughts on the cost here, and how do you get it down?
The ink wasn't dry when the CBO and the Medicare actuaries told us, oh, this thing is going to have a deficit. It is going to cost more. Now we got the long-term forecast from the CBO that says this does nothing to bend the growth of health care expenses. It actually increases health care expenses in the future. Health care is the biggest reason why we have this debt explosion. We just accelerated it. In 2042, I think it was, the CBO model breaks down because of the levels of debt. Now that's 2027, according to the CBO. And so what we've basically just done by adding 2 new entitlements on top of the other 3 unfunded ones is we've hastened the day of fiscal reckoning in this country. That's irresponsible. So what did they do this year? They're just not going to pass a budget. We're just going to spend with no budgeting. And so we've got to change the regime here. We've got to get this crowd out of town and bring in a better majority that will get their handle on this fiscal situation. And we owe it to the American people to give them real ideas on specifically how we would do that. I've put a plan out that did that. I brought a budget to the floor last year that cut $4.8 trillion out of spending and kept the top rate at 25% for corporations and individuals. So we can do this. We can have growth and prosperity, not austerity, but the window of opportunity to do that is beginning to shut.
Well, let me ask you this. What can business people do in that regard? I mean, I don't think businesses want to come on this show and say, no, we're not going to hire in 2011. But that's basically the reality. There's too many uncertainties when they look at the health care costs. They know their taxes are going up next year. In fact, I guess that's another question to me. Are you really going to get the revenue that we need by just raising taxes on the highest earners? Obviously, the president's going to have to go back on a campaign pledge and raise taxes on everyone. That's one question for you. And the second question is, for business people watching right now, how can they be proactive in terms of ensuring that the economy moves the way we want it to move so that they can actually get back into the business of creating jobs?
Well, the first question to ask the question is the answer to the question. You're not going to kind of have the revenue materialize that the static analysis says it will by raising taxes on dividends, capital gains, death, and income. That's not going to materialize, and it's going to slow down the economy. That's why you have this talk of double dip. Point number 2, I wish there's something I could say to encourage businesses to go back and hire, but when you look at what they're experiencing, higher interest rates, the Fed's going to hit the brakes eventually, and higher tax rates and more regulatory uncertainty and tighter credit, it's not a very good picture. I mean, I talked to an entrepreneur in my district who says he's going to have to lay off about 1,000 people as a consequence of this health care bill. These are the kinds of things that are hitting Main Street. And so what you have here is not really an economic policy as much as you have an ideological policy. And that's what's running the show up here in Washington these days.
All right. Congressman, good to have you on the program. Representative Paul Ryan, we appreciate your time today. Thanks very much.
Maria.
We'll be watching the developments from you, Congressman Paul Ryan. Well, first